things about what I'm going to call code rec today. We've spent 4 years, we've spent $6 million going to 8.5. Frankly, it is a bad product. It is supposed to be simple, short, and easy to understand. Has anybody tried to read it? Did anybody stay awake? Did anybody understand it? No. Well, I'm a lawyer and I read a lot of difficult stuff, and I'll have to tell you, I had no idea that you could make something longer, more complicated, and more incomprehensible with each draft. So it's just a bad product. The other thing, it's been a bad process. No one has really taken seriously the public's input and comments. It was like the city knew better and the consultants knew better than us, even though we're the people who live here. And it's our lives and our homes and our neighborhoods and our communities. And then frankly, it's bad policy. The idea that we're going to subdivide lots, allow commercialization and density in our neighborhoods, provide more entitlements, and somehow or other that's not going to result in displacement is just not in touch with reality. In short, giving developers more entitlements to people's homes and neighborhoods will result in the destruction of our existing homes, which will result in the building of higher income homes that are less affordable for people, and that means even more people are going to leave Austin. And so if you care that we have a city that's not all affluent and not all Anglo, you need to get involved in making sure that CodeNEXT reflects our values and not just speculators' values. But we need your help. We need you to get petitions signed. I promise you, I've done it a long time. 20,000 signatures is a lot of work. But it is the leverage we have. Because the council may or may not listen to us, the staff may or may not listen. But if we have a vote, they don't have a choice. And with that, I'm going to start with some of our speakers. And I'm going to start with Nelson Linder, my friend, the head of the NAACP, who has been with us the whole way. I think his main concern, he can tell you, is to make sure that we still have people of color in Austin after CodeNEXT.
Thank you, Fred, for that great introduction. And also, thank you for being here this afternoon. I'll be very brief. I am with the NAACP, and we're very concerned about CodeNEXT. I work in 7702, one of the most gentrified neighborhoods in the United States. I've seen, for example, the black community get pushed out of the area in places like Manor, Del Valley, Pflugerville. So when we imagine Austin, this is not what we imagine. We want to see a city where folks can live in of all colors and races, but also where neighborhoods are respected. Because if you don't respect neighborhoods, really you don't respect people. And we're about people. So this plan is a major threat to what's left of this city. And so I'm very proud to be a part of this, but I want to tell you, folks, they've got a head start on us right now, a major head start. We've got to work very fast to educate people and inform folks of the high stakes here, especially folks who are poor and black and brown in these neighborhoods. In fact, we're already panicking about how Austin's going to look. Think about gentrification, about economic segregation, about unaffordability. Think about how those things impact folks who are poor already. And think about how it would affect us in the next century, the next few years. This is a bad plan for Austin. Bad plan for Austin. And the folks who benefit are doing the same thing right now, making the city almost impossible a little bit for folks who make a little money, trying to live here and take care of their families. So this is bad business. So I want you to join me, we're going to join you, and being real loud and saying, look, CodeNEXT has to go. We want to urge the city council to trust the public. We know best. Put this on the ballot so we can vote about this, but also have a real conversation about Austin and what it really needs. It doesn't need more gentrification, more economic segregation. It needs more conversation and more caring about little people who live in this community, in this city. And so I'm trying to make this very, very plain. What you see is what you get. Fred mentioned the complication. It's all by design. But we know where the city is headed. We have an obligation to stop this process and make sure we save what's left of Austin, Texas. Join me and make this city livable for everybody and stop CodeNEXT, folks. Put it on the ballot. Thank you very much.
All right, hey, go.
One thing that needs to be put in CodeNEXT, and come on up, Bill, it's your time, is we need to not only have neighborhood protection and environmental integrity, we need economic justice. We need to be concerned about equity. And it's not just about the rich and those who are privileged in our community, but it's whether everybody can live in our community and remain here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Fred. I'm Bill Bunch, Executive Director of Save Our Springs Alliance. We're celebrating our 25th year this year, working to protect Barton Springs and the larger Edwards Aquifer ecosystem. Obviously, we've been dealing with Austin development issues for a long time, and our board has firmly endorsed this petition. We see the CodeNEXT process being broken, and we don't see our council members stepping up to fix it, and we need the voters to be the backstop for this. I'm not aware of any city anywhere that has proposed such a massive overhaul of their land development rules in one fell swoop. And here in Texas, we have the most draconian grandfathering laws of anywhere in the country. So once this thing goes into effect, there's no do-overs. We're stuck with it. So we need the voters and everyone out there to be a backstop, to be a second look on this measure, whatever comes out the back end. And we fully support the goals of CNC. We need environmental protection. We need economic justice as well. We need a community and a code that serves people who live here today, people who've lived here and paid taxes for a long time, and not just for developers or newcomers. We want to be welcoming to newcomers, but we need to follow our comprehensive plan and do infill appropriately and safely and protect our neighborhoods and our environment at the same time. With that, Lauren Ice is our staff attorney, and she's going to say a couple of words real quick on our behalf. She's done the heavy lifting for Save Our Springs through the CodeNEXT process. So here's Lauren Ice, staff attorney.
You look great in black, even if it isn't a funeral.
Black's actually my favorite color. So yeah, I'm Lauren. I'm a staff attorney with Bill. I'm also a former member of the CodeNEXT advisory group. And so I wanted to just come up here and say that I'm personally offended when I hear people say that we've been working on CodeNEXT for 5 or 6 years and we just need to pass something already, no matter what it is, we just need to get it done. Because as a member of the advisory group, and I'm sure previous members of the advisory group made the same request, we were asking for this information from staff and from consultants to see what they've been working on, what they've been using our money for. And every time we asked for it, we were told no, that we would get the whole thing when it was all ready and when they were ready to give it to us. And so the situation that we're in today is not our fault. This is something that was delayed from the beginning. It's something that the public has not been able to participate in from the beginning. And so what we're demanding today, a right to be taken seriously and to participate, that is exactly what should have been happening the whole time.
That's right.
And I would also like to echo some comments that some other folks have made, which is that the people who have been and who are going to be affected disproportionately by our land development practices are poor communities, our poor neighbors, our black and brown neighbors. They have not been included in this process, and this CodeNEXT has not been put through a racial equity analysis, and so we have no idea what it's going to do. I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to do, but the city is not being honest with what it's really going to do to our community, our existing community today. So I am very excited that we are taking back that power.
Thanks. So I have a question for you. If the city cared about gentrification and displacement, they had their first report in 2001. They've had 4 reports since. Why don't they have a plan? Why don't they have a policy? Don't you think they should put it into effect, their anti-displacement policies, before we adopt CodeNEXT? That might make it real. And with that, I'm going to Susanna? Here she comes, Susanna Almanza Poder. Susanna has seen the promises made by the developer community for many years, and she can tell you how much they've been honored.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to send a message to the city of Austin. It's time to stop your coding. We have decoded your code, okay? When you passed the 1928 master plan, you were talking about segregating people of color, the poor, the most vulnerable populations, and you wrote it into code. We decoded it. When you brought in urban renewal, we knew it was urban removal, and you removed and took the land from people of color. We have decoded your code. When you put together your Riverside Corridor plan, you called it master. Oh, you got so many masters. Aren't you tired of mastering, of trying to master the people? Aren't you tired of trying to master the poor, the working poor, and communities of color? Your Riverside Corridor master plan displaced 1,700 low-income working communities of color on Riverside Drive and continues that through our community in the poverty of Montopolis. But we decoded your code, and you talk about diversity, and you talk about your smart growth initiative and your new urbanism. We have decoded. We know what that means. That means high density. That means gentrification. That means unaffordability. That is what your smart growth initiative and your new urbanism is removing us from the urban central core. So we have decoded your code. And here you come again with your 17 categories of single-family zoning. Your 17 categories of how you're going to make it easier for the developers, for the Real Estate Council, for the Austin Builders Association, for the Chambers of Commerce to come in and take over the land from the poor, the working poor, and people of color. So yeah, stop your coding, because we've decoded it. And we see what you're doing. It's all about money. It's about money. It's about putting money in the pocket of the developers and the Real Estate Council, the Austin Builders Association, the Chambers of Commerce. It's not about people. And let me tell you, you can't code just numbers, because it's not about numbers. I tell people, my social security number does not define me. And your social security number does not define you. So CodeNEXT and its little setbacks and height regulations and so forth does not define humanity. Yeah! It does not define humanity. It does not talk about the real social issues and concerns of humanity. What it talks about is who's going to make the money. Who is going to pocket all of that money? It's not talking about fairness. It's not talking about a balance between the environment and humanity. It's talking about money. And I think we have decoded what that is. And we need to make sure that we stop it. That we stop it, because if the city of Austin is not looking through what it's about to enter and through an equity lens, through fairness and transparency, then we don't need it. We don't need it. We need to make sure that we next this code, because we're tired of these codes that doesn't do a thing for the people, only does for the rich. So let's make sure and block it. Let's fight together. Let's struggle. Let's make a new Austin, okay? Because I'm tired of saying this is a progressive, liberal city when we're down to 5% African American population. I'm tired when they say that this is a progressive and liberal city and we can't afford to live here. We've got to change the coding and the words and of how they're trying to set this city. This is not the city that we want to work for. We want to work for a city where we can all live together, regardless of our income and regardless of the color of our skin. That's what we want. We want to make sure that there's an environment in the urban core. Hello, it's not just in the suburbs. There's an environment in the urban core. And we live in that environment. And we deserve protection too. And so we're going to have to work together to make sure that we keep that balance and that we put the city on the right path of justice. Thank you.
I wanted to say, Carmen, you're next. Where's Carmen? Sorry. But I wanted to say that Friganese and Associates, who are the consultants on the mapping, they literally said that they were not taking racial equity and racial and ethnic demographics into effect in their drawing of the maps and in their coding. And in fact, the main criteria they used in the mapping, and you can find this on Community Not Commodities website, their main criteria in drawing the lines and the maps was whether or not it would maximize the redevelopment potential of the land. Well, that's just another word for making money. And the whole point of zoning is to have other values besides making money. So the whole premise behind the mapping is how much can we maximize developers' profits. It's not about our neighborhoods, our safety, traffic, flood mitigation, the environment, schools. It's about how much money can be made. Well, that's why we're called Community Not Commodity, because we reject that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carmen. Carmen Yanis Polito is with GABA, and she's a great organizer.
Thanks, Fred. Well, I'm so glad to have this opportunity, and I'm so glad that this guy over here handed me this handout, this fact sheet that he's giving people, because I would love to address it, so I hope you're listening. And if you listen to KUT News this morning, there was a story by Mose Buchel. Lauren Ice was featured. And, you know, I really like Mose. Most of the time, I think he does great reporting, but I was a little disappointed because today was very one-sided. We had three folks arguing in favor of what's happening with CodeNEXT and denser compact communities, and talked about the divide in the environmental community. And then they quoted Lauren Ice and said, we're not sure, we can't see that we're gonna get all the community benefit for the way things are set up for the proposed density and entitlements. Well, this is the point I really wanna make about this. I'm an environmentalist. And I don't disagree with you that compact and connected cities are better for the environment. And there's a big argument to be made that more urban development can be cleaner and greener than sprawl. Here's what's missing from this conversation. When you densify an urban environment and there is not affordability and you effectively displace families from the central core, where do they go? They sprawl. This is what's happening, people. We're not talking about your urban renewal and your white flight to the suburb. We're talking about the suburbanization of poverty. We're talking about people who are this close to losing their home equity in their houses. If the land value shoots up because 10 times more units go on and ADUs come in and they're sold at twice and 3 times and 4 times and 10 times what these people paid for their property, where are they going to go? They lose their equity, and if they can hang on to their home equity, they're going to buy, and they're going to buy further out where these counties aren't requiring all of these green requirements. So if we don't talk about equity, you can forget density being a solution for sprawl. You can forget compact cities being an environmental solution to what we're doing, because all you're doing is, yeah, you know what, if you can afford one of these condos, I bet you can pay $50 or less a month in utilities, because they're LEED certified, because they're green, because they're compact, and you can walk, and you can ditch your vehicle and take public transit lines. It's awesome. But how many of us can afford to live in these condos? And how many people can actually afford to live in the infill that's coming into East Austin, South Austin, and now we're seeing coming for the Crescent? So what I want to say too is that we got to really be behind our council members. As much as we're trying to hold them accountable, we got to be their base and support them too, and remind them of who their constituents are, and we have to keep the dialogue open because they're getting pressure from every single side. And I was meeting with a council member this morning from one of the most directly impacted parts of this city. And there is truly a belief that the density coming into East Austin and South Austin is somehow keeping at bay the displacement from the other areas. So that's because we know density hasn't brought any affordability to East Austin, it's done the opposite. And we also know that the land code by itself isn't gonna solve the problems. This is a policy issue. And do you know that we had developers, the big scary developer word, we had developers at the Capitol all summer fighting for linkage fees in the spring for a policy that a lot of the communities support, that we would get a huge amount of funding for affordable housing. That's the kind of stuff we need to be fighting. We need to find where our alliances are, where it works for developers, where it works for community first, and we need to fashion these solutions. But what we also have to remember is that while the code can't fix all of our problems, it can definitely throw fuel on the fire. It can definitely make things worse. And so I'm calling on City Hall to take a Hippocratic oath on this process, to do no harm. We don't expect you to fix it overnight. We don't expect you to fix it right now. And we're not saying the land development code doesn't need changes. It needs changes. The change makers are standing right here. The change makers have been fighting for policy to change so that we actually have policies that work for us. But if our city council and our commissions can't take a Hippocratic oath on this, then they need to leave it to the voters so that we can. Thank you.
Is David Jones here? David, come on up.
Yay, David! Yay, David!
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for coming out, and I'm here to talk to you about signing our petition and the cost of growth. I want to ask you, are you familiar with the phrase, "You've bitten off more than you can chew"?
Yeah.
Your eyes are bigger than your stomach. Okay, good. That sounds familiar. Because I'm in that situation right now. You know, I want to tell you, I'm going to get personal with you right now. I'm a person living with AIDS. What that means is I live on a fixed income. What that also means is my options for affordable housing are, I can't afford to buy a house in Austin, Texas. I can barely afford to pay my rent. This has to stop. I have to echo the sentiments of the previous speakers. We've got to do something about this. We need you to sign this petition. We've got to get about 22,000 signatures. That means we need all of you, everyone that is a valid voter in the city of Austin, to sign this petition. We need this on the ballot. It's time to get people in control of their own destination, of their own destiny, so that they can have choices for affordable housing, so that they do make decisions and policies that can positively impact poor people, such as myself, people of color, such as myself. Because right now, it feels like we're just out of control. It feels like we are sprawling, but in the wrong direction. And I know that with all of you here, that there is hope, because you care about this issue just as much as I do. And that says to me that we can work together as a community. That's what Austin is. It's a community. It's not a commodity. Okay? It's great that we have developers that want to come here and build housing. That's wonderful. Like I said, I someday would like to have a house myself, but I want something that's affordable. I can't afford a $300,000 house. I don't have a 20% down payment, nor can I pay the taxes with that increase when more people come to Austin. And let's talk about bringing more people to Austin. That means more taxes, more debt, which is what I've been saying. That's going to be a higher cost of living. That's going to be higher prices for our housing. So where is the affordability? Where is the enjoyment of being able to stand out in this breeze and look at this beautiful Lady Bird Lake and not feel like I need to go jump in it because I can't afford to pay my rent? So I want to ask you to join in with me to sign this petition, to get your friends to sign this petition, and let's stop CodeNEXT, which wrecks Austin. Let's make it Code Never. Thank you.
Take the petition!
Yeah, take a petition. Take a yard sign. Take a sticker. Put the yard signs up in your neighborhood. As you know, a lot of people still don't know what CodeNEXT is. We have one more speaker. I don't think Ed Windler could make it. My good friend, the developer, who will tell you as a developer that CodeNEXT will intensify development in neighborhoods, commercialize uses in neighborhoods, and result in more displacement. But I wanted to also ask to come up my good friend Fred McGee, who's written a lot about displacement and historic preservation, and for him to say a few words. Thanks for coming.
Well, I guess it's evening now. Good evening, everybody. How y'all doing? Mind if I take a second to move this mic up? Okay, here we go. I'll try to be brief because I have to go inside and talk to the Planning Commission. I would like you to consider for a second how gentrification, of which CodeNEXT is in many ways the ultimate manifestation, is like colonialism. Think about it for a second. I was talking to a friend of mine from Africa not too long ago. He gave me a classic colonial refrain that's common in Africa. He said, when the white man got here, they had the Bible and we had the land. By the time it was over, we had the Bible and they had the land. Okay? Now, I would like to place before you a consideration that the intellectual foundation for much of what we have been experiencing with CodeNEXT is based upon a religion, a cult, like Scientology. That religion is called New Urbanism. Okay? And we are the exorcists right here. Okay? We're going to be the people who are going to cast them out. Okay? Cast them out. Okay? Send these religious people back to where they came from because we know who they are and what they stand for. Now, let me give you, just briefly, some of the intellectual foundation here behind New Urbanism and why it's best understood politically or in religious terms. That's because New Urbanism began in the early 1990s and was applied first in America's public housing projects, mostly occupied by African Americans. Throughout the 1990s, people such as Andres Dewani and Peter Calthorpe said it was good for black people to not be concentrated in their poverty and that we must de-densify public housing projects because they were too dense. Fast forward to 2017, what are we being told now? We're not dense enough. That's what we're being told now. In other words, when it's too many black people in one place, oh, we gotta break that shit up. Okay? Because that's no good. Okay? But when it comes to making money for developers and our friends, well then, yeah, density is good. ADUs are great. Okay? It's a very passive-aggressive way of talking about it. It's also important to understand and to undermine the intellectual claim that this nonsense is good for the environment. That is at best debatable. Okay? At best. It is dogma, financed by special interests to make it look as if this type of hyperdensification that these people want is an environmentally good thing. Plaza Saltillo will not be carbon or energy neutral. I don't know anybody who has a proposal on the table to make it, or in German terms, plus energy, for instance, which would mean it would be an energy producer, although that's entirely possible. This stuff is about land, money, power, profits. Plain and simple, and we stand for community, not commodity. Sign the petition, get your friends to sign it, and let's put this stuff to bed so that we can build a future Austin that works for everybody.
One last speaker, I'm going to have Mary Ingalls say a few words. But before I do that, the great Frederick Douglass, who of course fought slavery and fought for voting rights, he said something that you all need to remember. Power never concedes without a fight. If you want to win, you're going to have to get out there and work. You're going to have to get petitions. You're going to have to get your neighbors involved. You're going to have to educate your neighbors. We can win this fight, but it's going to take a fight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mary. And I'll turn it over.
Speaking of fighting, I'm Mary Engel, and I have been the president of the Austin Neighborhoods Council for 4 long years during this CodeNEXT process. And I have spoken on behalf of neighborhoods for all of those years. Last week in the Chronicle, a reporter called me Chief NIMBY. And guess what? I'll take it! Because if that's what I am, I'm Chief NIMBY, I'm protecting neighborhoods, I accept the title. So I want to say this in closing. This process has been a disaster. If you can't trust the people who've done it, you can't trust the process because the public was shut out, you certainly cannot trust the product. So we must sign those petitions, take 1 million of them home, get your friends, your neighbors, your dogs to sign the petition. And thank you for coming.
Thank all of y'all for coming. Bill Oliver, where are you, Bill? And other folk are going to play for your enjoyment, and then you can go inside, and I think there's 6 different planning commission sessions. You can hopefully get a chance to speak. And thank you very much for coming, and let's fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Everybody get a petition! Get a petition! Get a petition!
Hey, let's hear it for Fred and everybody, all the speakers up here. Yeah! All right, we rehearsed for months for this, so don't leave, huh?